There is a photograph, the only one that matters for the next hour, of a young Army captain in a khaki uniform, his hair parted neatly on the left, his mouth almost smiling, but not quite. He wears the round-rimmed glasses of a man who reads more than he shoots. On his left sleeve, near the shoulder, is a red cross inside a white circle. This is Benjamin Lewis Salomon of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He is a dentist. He has been in the U.S. Army for 4 years. He has never fired at another human being in anger. He will do so for the first and last time in a few hours. The photograph was taken sometime in early 1944. He has already crossed the Pacific once by then. He has already stood on the black sand of a rear area beach on Oahu and watched other men, infantrymen, real infantrymen, practice landing from Higgins boats in surf that felt as warm as a bath. He has already told his mother, in a letter home to Milwaukee, that he is well and that he misses the dogs, and that he is thinking of buying a new office when the war is over. The office he means is on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. He has an eye on it. He has drawn its floor plan twice in the margins of a battalion supply log. 2 dental chairs, a waiting room with a magazine rack. He wants Life and Time and the Saturday Evening Post, and 1 shelf of paperbacks for the children who come with parents who need to sit longer. He is 30 years old and he has been planning this waiting room since he was 15. The photograph is not the one we need. The one we need is the one nobody took. It is from 6 months later on the northwest coast of the island of Saipan, in a canvas tent with a red cross painted on the roof. The tent is set into a small clearing among ironwood trees, above a coastal plain called Tanapag, near a village called Makunsha. The floor of the tent is a piece of tarp over dirt. There are stretchers laid down in 2 rows. There are 30 wounded American soldiers on those stretchers and around them. Some have lost feet, some have lost eyes, some have taken shrapnel to the abdomen and are being kept alive on morphine and plasma, and the promise that a Jeep is coming. The Jeep is not coming. The Jeep is on fire 300 meters east in a ditch beside a coconut grove. Its driver is dead. Its radio is broken. Nobody in the aid station knows this yet. Captain Salomon has been on his feet for 31 hours. He has been working under a paraffin lantern because he does not trust battery light for suture work. He has an apron over his uniform. The apron used to be white. It is not white anymore. His glasses are smudged. His hair, once so neatly parted, is stuck to his forehead in wet strings. He is holding a syrette of morphine over the arm of a corporal from Buffalo, New York, who cannot see him because both of the corporal's eyes are covered in gauze. "Doc," the corporal is saying. "Doc, tell me when." "Almost, son, almost." He is not the corporal's father. He is 4 years older than the corporal. But every wounded man on Saipan is somebody's son, and every man in a Red Cross tent is a stand-in for that boy's father. Salomon has learned this. He learned it at USC when a child came in for a broken jaw and cried the way a 2-year-old cries. And he learned it again in Hawaii when a private came in with a rotten molar and admitted in a voice too small for a soldier that he had never told his mother he was scared of dying. Salomon depresses the syrette. The corporal exhales. His hand goes slack. He is not dead. He is asleep. But for a moment, Salomon lets himself pretend he is, because if he is asleep, then he is not in pain. And if he is not in pain, then this tent is a tent full of sleeping men and not a tent full of the wounded. And Salomon can straighten his back for the first time in an hour without also carrying somebody else's fear. He hears it then. It comes from the east, from the direction of Tanapag town. It sounds at first like a low wind through the ironwoods. It is not a wind. It is a note being held by 3,000 human throats, and it is climbing. He walks to the tent flap. He puts his hand on the canvas. He does not pull it back. He listens. There is another sound braided into the first one, a metallic sound, like 100 canteens being shaken at once. He knows what that is. That is the sound of bayonets on rifles. That is the sound of scabbards slapping against belts. That is the sound of a great many men running toward a great many other men in the dark. He turns back to the tent. 30 faces are looking at him. Some of them can only look with one eye. Some of them are looking through him. One young corpsman named Ballard, who has been with him since Hawaii, stands with a plasma bottle raised in one hand and a look on his face that Salomon has seen exactly once before in his life. On the face of his own mother in Milwaukee in 1929, the year Salomon's father lost the family store. Ballard says, "Sir?" Salomon looks at him for a long moment. Then he looks around the tent at every man on every stretcher, and he does something a dentist trained at USC and drafted into the 102nd Infantry Regiment and reassigned to the Dental Corps and reassigned again to the 27th Infantry Division and reassigned one last time as battalion surgeon of a battalion, 105th Infantry, is not by any article of the Geneva Convention supposed to do. He walks to the corner of the tent where a wounded soldier from Rochester, New York, has laid down an M1 carbine because he cannot lift it. He picks the carbine up, he works the action, he turns to Ballard. His voice is very calm. "Get the walking ones out," he says. "Anyone who can carry, carry. Move now. Don't stop for me." Ballard opens his mouth. "Ballard, go." The screaming outside is louder now. It has a shape to it. It has a direction. It is coming for the tent. The stock market has just crashed. The lakes are frozen. Ben Salomon is 15 years old. His father owns a small dry goods store on the near south side, 4 blocks from the Milwaukee River. His mother keeps the books. They are a Jewish family in a neighborhood of German and Polish Catholics. The store's shelves are stocked with children's shoes, needles, thread, bolts of cotton, and the kind of small, necessary things people are about to stop buying. Ben is a middle child. He is small for his age. He has bad eyes. The round-rimmed glasses came in the 4th grade. And a stammer that only comes out when he is nervous, which is often. He has been reading since he was 4. His mother taught him English out of a Yiddish-English Bible, so his English still sometimes carries the cadence of a language older than either. He is not a fighter. He was never a fighter. One time he tried to be, at 11, a Polish boy named Jerzy Wysocki broke his glasses and took his lunch money in the alley behind the store. He walked home with his hand pressed to his cheekbone and told his mother he had tripped, and she looked at him with the same look she would give him 20 years later in his last photograph home from Hawaii. A look that said, "I know and I love you, and please stop lying to me." The thing that saves him, that winter of 1929, is a Boy Scout troop. Troop 24, meeting Tuesdays in the basement of a Methodist church on National Avenue. He goes because his father tells him he must. Boys need brothers who are not their brothers. Ben does not understand this at first. Then he does. Scouting saves him. He earns merit badges the way other boys hoard baseball cards. Pioneering, first aid, camping, signaling, wildlife studies. He is fast at knots. He is very fast at first aid. When his patrol leader teaches them how to bandage a scalp wound, Ben ties the roller bandage in the correct diagonal pattern on the first try, and the patrol leader, a boy from a family that owns 2 automobiles, looks at him and says, "You know what, Ben? You could be a doctor." Ben goes home that night and tells his father he is going to be a doctor. His father laughs. Not unkindly, but he laughs. Doctors need medical school. Medical school needs money. The store is closing. There will be no money. Ben does not argue. In the spring, he makes Eagle Scout. It is the highest rank in the Boy Scouts. He is one of the youngest in the state of Wisconsin to earn it. The ceremony in the basement of the Methodist church. His mother wears her one good dress and cries the way Jewish mothers cry, quietly into a handkerchief, so as not to embarrass anyone. His father does not cry. His father shakes his hand as if he is a business partner and says, "You will make something of yourself, Benjamin. Perhaps not what you plan, but something." Ben will remember this sentence for the rest of his life. He does not become a doctor, he becomes a dentist. The decision is practical. Dental school is 4 years, medical school is longer. Dental school will let him practice sooner. He does the math on the back of a Boy Scout handbook at 15 and decides, I will go west, and I will do teeth, and I will heal what I can. 2 years later, in 1932, he graduates from Lincoln High School in Milwaukee, 10th in his class. He works one summer in a butcher shop and one winter in a shoe repair shop and puts every dollar in a postal savings account. In the fall of 1934, with a scholarship offer from the University of Southern California and a train ticket paid for by his uncle in Kenosha, he boards a Union Pacific coach car at Milwaukee Road Depot and rides west. He arrives in Los Angeles in September. He is 19 years old. He has never seen a palm tree. He rents a room in a boarding house in Boyle Heights, a Jewish neighborhood on the east side of the Los Angeles River. It costs him $4 a week. He walks to USC every morning across the 4th Street Bridge. He works nights at a delicatessen owned by a family from Odessa. He learns how to say, "How are you?" in Spanish, Russian, Armenian, and enough Japanese to bow to a customer. He graduates USC undergrad in 1935. He is accepted immediately into USC's School of Dentistry. He completes his DDS in 1937. He's 22 years old. His graduation photograph, the one that will one day sit in a display case in the school's Memorial Hall, shows a young man in a dark suit, his hair parted neatly on the left, holding a diploma. He is not smiling. He looks in that photograph exactly the way he will look 7 years later on Saipan, 1 week before he dies. That summer, he does something unusual. He walks into the U.S. Army recruiting office on South Broadway in downtown Los Angeles, and he asks to enlist as a dentist. The recruiting sergeant looks up. The sergeant is a large man from Georgia with a mustache. He listens to Salomon's request. He looks at his transcript. He looks at his diploma. He shrugs. "Son," the sergeant says, "we don't need dentists right now." Salomon says, "Are you sure?" "Sure as I've ever been." Salomon walks back out into the California sun. He goes home. He starts a practice on the edge of Boyle Heights in a 2-room storefront next to a laundry. His patients are Jewish garment workers and Mexican brick makers and elderly Japanese fishermen from Terminal Island. He charges what they can pay. Sometimes he charges nothing. For 3 years, this is his life. Then in 1940, the U.S. Congress passes the Selective Training and Service Act, the first peacetime draft in American history. Ben Salomon, 26 years old, holder of a DDS from USC, single-story practice on the edge of Boyle Heights, single, no children, no dependents, is called up. He goes. They do not send him to the dental corps. They send him to the infantry. This is one of the small, quiet absurdities of American history. For the first 2 years of Benjamin Salomon's Army service, the U.S. government paid a licensed dentist a private's wages to carry an M1903 Springfield rifle. He reported to Fort Ord, California in the summer of 1940. He was assigned to the 102nd Infantry Regiment, then in the process of being reactivated. He was a private E1. Serial number began with 39, the block reserved for volunteers from the western United States, though he had technically not volunteered. He had been drafted and had reported without protest. The 102nd Infantry did not know he was a dentist. The paperwork got separated somewhere in San Francisco. He did not tell them. Some biographers have wondered why. The answer is probably the simplest one. He was a Jewish kid from Milwaukee who had grown up in a household where you did what the government asked of you, because in the countries your grandparents had left, the government did not usually ask. He turned out, to the surprise of his sergeants, to be an excellent infantryman. He was small, 5'7", 140 pounds, and his eyesight in his right eye was 20/60, even with glasses. But he could march. He could shoot. His time on the rifle range was consistently in the top quarter of his company. He could tie any knot the field manual asked of him, faster than the men who had grown up on farms. He could read a topographic map in the dark. He could do first aid in a way that reduced the company medic, a middle-aged corporal from Bakersfield, nearly to tears the first time he watched Salomon splint a broken tibia. The corporal was the one who eventually reported him to the company commander. "Sir, that private," the corporal said, "is a doctor." The company commander pulled Salomon's file. Then he pulled the file again. Then he made a phone call to the regimental adjutant that took 20 minutes and involved 2 long silences and 1 loud laugh. Then he pulled Salomon into his tent and asked why in the name of God and his own mother he had not said anything. Salomon said, "Sir, they told me they didn't need dentists." The company commander said, "Salomon, it's 1940. We need everybody." He was promoted through corporal to sergeant over the next 18 months, still in the infantry, still not officially a dentist. He served as a squad leader. He led a rifle squad on maneuvers in the Mojave Desert. He got sunburned. He got dysentery. He wrote home to Milwaukee that Army food was, at best, an insult to teeth. In late 1942, the paperwork finally caught up with him. He was commissioned first lieutenant in the U.S. Army Dental Corps. He was assigned briefly to the dental clinic at the Presidio of Monterey. He treated more than 4,000 soldiers in 6 months, some at a rate of 1 every 12 minutes. He wrote a paper, never published, on jaw reconstruction in blast injuries. In May of 1943, he received orders for the 105th Infantry Regiment, 27th Infantry Division. The 27th was a New York National Guard division activated for federal service in October 1940, now training in Oahu. They needed a dentist. Salomon boarded a troop ship at San Francisco in the last week of May 1943 and sailed for Hawaii. He was 30 years old. The 27th Infantry Division was not a glamorous unit. It was not the 82nd Airborne. It was not the 1st Marine Division. It was made up of dairymen from Rochester, dock workers from Buffalo, textile mill hands from Utica and Syracuse, and a handful of sons of the old New York Jewish garment trade who spoke better Yiddish than English. They were older than most divisions. The average age was 26. They had already lost men on Makin Atoll in November 1943 in a fight that had gone worse than anyone had planned. They were not, when Salomon met them, an especially confident division. He set up a dental clinic in a Quonset hut on the north shore of Oahu. Within 6 weeks, he had a waiting list of 200. Within 3 months, he had personally seen every enlisted man in the 105th Infantry at least once. He worked 6 days a week. He gave dental hygiene lectures on Sunday. He wrote a training memorandum, later distributed regiment-wide, on how to construct field dentures from local materials. The soldiers of the 105th began to notice something about their new dentist. He would not sit down. Not during appointments. He stood even for 4-hour extractions. Not during lunch. He ate at his desk. Not during briefings. He stood in the back of the tent, hands clasped behind him, glasses fogged, listening. When somebody asked him about it, he shrugged and said his back hurt when he sat too long. It was not true. He was simply so hungry to be useful that he refused to stop being available for even the minute it would have taken to lower himself into a chair. They came to love him for it. His nickname in the 105th became Doc. Not the dentist, not Salomon, just Doc. As if the men had already, in their New York and their Buffalo and their Rochester way, made him something more than a tooth puller. They had made him a battalion father. This is important, because when the 27th Infantry Division loaded onto transport ships in Hawaii in the last days of May 1944 and set sail for a place they had never heard of in a chain of islands called the Marianas, and were told that this operation, Operation Forager, would be the deepest strike into the Japanese defensive ring the United States had yet attempted. Doc Salomon was not going to be their dentist anymore. He was, in the 4th week of June, going to walk up to the regimental adjutant on the black sand of Yellow Beach 1 on Saipan and volunteer to replace the wounded surgeon of the 2nd Battalion. The adjutant was a captain named Sherwood. Sherwood knew Salomon. Sherwood said, "Doc, you're a dentist." Salomon said, "I've done trauma work in Hawaii. I've assisted on abdominal surgery. Know the drills." Sherwood said, "Doc, if you get killed doing surgery, we lose our best dentist." Salomon said, "If we lose the 2nd Battalion because they don't have a surgeon, we lose more than a dentist." Sherwood looked at him for a long time. Then Sherwood signed the order. 2 weeks later, on the night of July 6, 1944, Captain Benjamin L. Salomon, Battalion Surgeon 2105, was standing in a canvas aid station tent on a slope above the Tanapag coastal plain, about to spend the last 31 hours of his life saving as many men as he could. Understand what happened at dawn on July 7, 1944. You have to understand what a Gyokusai charge was, and why the man who ordered this one, Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, commander of Japanese forces on Saipan, did not expect any of his men to come home. Gyokusai is a Japanese word that means, literally, shattered jewel. It comes from an 8th century Chinese poem. It is better to be a shattered jewel than an intact tile. In modern Japanese military doctrine of 1944, it was a euphemism. It meant, we are going to die, all of us, and we are going to take as many of you with us as we can. By July 6, 1944, the Japanese defense of Saipan had collapsed. Saito and Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the same Nagumo who had commanded the Japanese carrier force at Pearl Harbor 31 months earlier, had been forced back into the northern tip of the island. Saito's remaining troops were dug into caves and gullies near Marpi Point at the end of a coastal plain called Tanapag. They had almost no food. They had almost no water. Their artillery was destroyed. Their tanks were burning. That afternoon, in a cave overlooking the sea, Saito dictated a final order to his surviving officers. It read in part, "There is no longer any distinction between combatants and non-combatants. There will be no more attack, no more retreat. There is only Gyokusai." Then he committed seppuku. Nagumo shot himself. Behind them in the caves, between 3,000 and 5,000 men, soldiers, sailors, wounded, walking wounded, cooks, radio operators, teenage naval recruits, began preparing for a night attack down the coastal plain against the American perimeter. The American perimeter was the 105th Infantry Regiment. It was strung out along an east-west line about 800 meters south of the village of Tanapag, on flat ground, broken by coconut groves, ironwood clumps, and a few low limestone ridges. The 1st Battalion held the beach flank on the left. The 2nd Battalion held the center right, on higher ground near the base of a small ridge. The 3rd Battalion was in reserve, further south. Colonel Leonard Bishop, the regimental commander, had been told by higher headquarters that intelligence indicated possible enemy activity in his front. He had been asking since noon for reinforcements, artillery pre-registration, and Marine tanks. He had received none of these things. Salomon's aid station sat about 100 yards behind the 2nd Battalion's front line, in a small hollow between two ironwood clumps above the coastal plain. It was the standard T-shape of a battalion aid station tent. One main tent for triage, two smaller tents flanking for post-op recovery. A generator hummed under a tarp. Two jeeps were parked outside. An ambulance borrowed from Divisional Medical sat at the edge of the clearing, its rear doors chalked open. By nightfall on July 6th, 30 wounded were already in Salomon's care. Most were from the day's skirmishing along the perimeter. A Japanese probe at 15 Wow that had cost 2,105, 4 killed and 18 wounded. Salomon had done 3 abdominal surgeries by lantern light between 18I and 23 Watt, working with a corpsman named Ballard, a corporal named Silverberg who was training as a surgical assistant, and one enlisted man from Utica whose only medical experience was 2 years working in his father's veterinary clinic. Salomon did not stop. He drank black coffee from a Sears thermos. He ate half a K ration sometime near midnight. He hummed when the surgery was going well. The song he hummed most often, according to Silverberg's post-war account, was "You Are My Sunshine." At 02 Wire on July 7th, the perimeter went quiet. That silence, veterans of the Pacific will tell you, is the sound that meant the worst was coming. Japanese banzai attacks did not begin with fire. They began with silence. The attacking force would advance in near total quiet, bayonets fixed, mouths closed, until the last 200 meters. Then, on a signal, they would begin the scream. The scream on Saipan that morning began at approximately 4:45. Nobody on the American perimeter knew what it was at first. The 1st Battalion's forward listening post reported movement. Then they reported a lot of movement. Then they reported that they were being overrun. The last transmission from Lieutenant Colonel William J. O'Brien, commander of 1st Battalion, was recorded in the regimental log at 04:52. It read, "Send everything." There was nothing to send. O'Brien himself would die within the hour, standing on the hood of a jeep firing a Colt 45 into the mass of Japanese swarming past him. He would receive the Medal of Honor for it posthumously. So would Sergeant Thomas Baker of 1st Battalion, who, refusing evacuation despite mortal wounds, would be propped against a coconut tree with a pistol and 8 rounds. When his body was recovered the next day, the pistol was empty and 8 Japanese lay dead within 20 feet of him. The banzai charge broke through the 1st Battalion's line in the first 6 minutes. It rolled over the American positions like surf. At 05 was, the leading edge of the Japanese assault was pouring into the 2nd Battalion's flank. Ballard, the corpsman, would later testify that Salomon had heard them coming for a good 3 or 4 minutes before they arrived. Ballard said Salomon had done 3 things in those minutes. First, he had walked to each of the wounded men in the tent and put his hand on each of their shoulders and told them, one by one, that everything was going to be all right. Second, he had turned to Ballard and Silverberg and the veterinary clinic private and said in a voice completely without fear, "Gentlemen, we are going to move these boys. Anyone who can walk will walk. Anyone who can carry, carries." Third, he had walked to the corner of the tent where a wounded rifleman from Rochester had put down his M1 carbine because he could not lift it anymore, and he had picked up the carbine. Then the canvas at the back of the tent moved, and a Japanese soldier, one of thousands, who began to crawl through. The first Japanese soldier to enter the aid station tent came in on his belly. He did not shout. He was not part of the screaming wave. He had come around the north side of the perimeter, alone, and found the tent behind the front line. and he had done what any small unit infiltrator does. He had gotten low, and he had cut a small slit in the back canvas with a bayonet, and he was crawling in on his elbows. Silverberg, the surgical assistant, was the first to see him. Silverberg was 22 years old. He was from the Bronx. He had learned surgery over 8 months of Sundays under a paraffin lamp on Oahu, watching Salomon extract impacted third molars and teaching himself, on the side, how to close a subcutaneous suture line. He was, in every sense that mattered, an amateur. He had never fired a rifle in anger. He saw the movement at the back of the tent. He said, "Doc." Salomon looked. The Japanese soldier was halfway through. His right hand was on the tent floor. His left hand held a rifle with a fixed bayonet. His eyes were adjusting to the lantern light. His face, this detail comes from the National Milwaukee Museum's reconstruction, drawn from post-war reports by Ballard and Silverberg, was not a warrior's face. It was the face of a boy of perhaps 18, thin from starvation, dirt smeared across one cheek. Teeth. Salomon would have noticed the teeth automatically, the way a dentist always notices. Crooked and gray from bad water. Salomon did not have time to lift the M1 carbine to his shoulder. He was 6 feet from the intruder, and the intruder had a rifle with a bayonet already coming up. He did the only thing he had. In the 2 seconds that gave him, Salomon crossed the tent, took the M1 carbine off the table, raised it to his hip because he did not have time for a shoulder mount, and fired 1 round into the intruder's forehead at a distance of 4 feet. The report of the M1 carbine, a small, dry crack, quieter than most people who have never fired one imagine, was the first shot Benjamin Salomon had ever fired at another human being in his life. He was almost 30. He would live approximately 22 more minutes. Silverberg would say later that Salomon did not look shocked. He did not look sick. He did not look even particularly angry. He looked, Silverberg said, exactly the way he had looked all night in surgery. Focused, present, doing the next necessary thing. The next necessary thing was that 2 more Japanese were coming through the front of the tent. They came in fast. They were not infiltrators. They were part of the main assault wave. They were armed. They were screaming. Salomon shot the first one at 8 feet. The M1 carbine's 15-round magazine still had 13 rounds. He shot the second one at 3 feet. He was, at this point, physically between them and the wounded. 2 of the wounded, men whose faces we will never know, because the records of that night are incomplete, had rolled off their stretchers onto the tent floor and were trying, one-handed and one-legged, to crawl toward the tent's rear flap. Salomon turned to Ballard. He said the sentence that Ballard would carry, unedited, for the rest of Ballard's life. He said, "Move them, or they die here." Then he said more quietly, "Go, Ballard, I'll cover." Ballard hesitated. Salomon looked at him. Ballard would later tell an oral historian in 1985 that in that moment he had understood, entirely and without further discussion, that the captain was giving him a legal order and also releasing him from any obligation to try to fight beside him. It was, Ballard said, the last time he ever saw Ben Salomon smile. Then Ballard began doing the work. He and Silverberg and the veterinary clinic private got every ambulatory wounded man on his feet or onto a shoulder. 2 men who could not walk were carried piggyback. 2 who could not be carried piggyback were dragged on stretchers. They went out the south flap of the tent into the dark ironwoods toward what they hoped was the 3rd Battalion's reserve position. Ballard was the last one out. He looked back over his shoulder. Salomon was standing in the middle of the tent, the M1 carbine at his shoulder now, firing single shots at the tent's north canvas. Muzzle flashes from the north told him where the enemy was, even before they were fully through the wall. He was calm. He was, Ballard said, humming. Ballard said he could not, in the moment, hear what Salomon was humming. He would spend the rest of his life certain it had been, "You Are My Sunshine." Behind Ballard, as he turned into the ironwoods, the sound of the M1 carbine gave out. The magazine ran empty. Then there was a shorter, sharper sound, the metallic slap of a bolt being drawn back on something bigger. Ballard did not turn around to look. He would later understand what that sound had been. It was the bolt of a .30 caliber water-cooled Browning M1917 machine gun, taken from the hands of a dead crewman 2 steps outside the tent, being cocked by a dentist from Milwaukee for the first and only time in his life. We do not have an eyewitness for what happened next. This is important to say plainly because the temptation, when telling a story like this, is to describe what cannot be described. The last 20 minutes of Benjamin Salomon's life had no living American witness. Every man who might have seen it was either evacuating with Ballard or already inside the wave of the Japanese assault, or dead. What we have, instead, is the ground. When Company G of the 2nd Battalion counterattacked north through those ironwood clumps 3 days later, after the Japanese charge had been broken and the surviving remnants of the 105th had linked back up with the 3rd Battalion, a burial detail was sent to recover the American dead in the vicinity of the aid station. What they found in the small clearing outside the tent has been documented in the after-action report of the 27th Infantry Division, filed with the Army Center of Military History in Washington, and confirmed by the sworn testimony of Major Edward McCarthy, the officer who led the burial detail. They found Captain Benjamin Salomon. He was slumped forward over the pistol grips of a .30 caliber Browning M1917 water-cooled machine gun. His hands were still on the grips. His right index finger was still curled inside the trigger guard. The gun's water jacket was cold. The ammunition can beside it was empty. There were spent brass casings in a cone in front of him, extending 8 feet outward. In a semicircle in front of the gun, at ranges between 2 and 40 feet, they counted 98 dead Japanese soldiers. The gun itself was in the 4th of 4 positions. They could trace the earlier 3 positions on the ground. In each place, approximately 15 feet apart, radiating outward from the tent, the ground was scarred by tripod feet. In each place, there was a mound of enemy dead. Each place, the mound was slightly taller than the last. Behind each old position, a set of drag marks in the dirt showed where he had moved the gun forward and to the side, dragging the tripod and the water jacket and the ammunition can with him, alone. The pattern told a story that even the burial detail, men who had seen every horror the Pacific could offer, described in the after-action report with the phrase, "nearly beyond belief." Salomon had apparently opened up on the initial wave from the tent line. He had fired the M1917 until the enemy dead in front of him rose high enough that he could no longer aim beyond them. Then he had, single-handed, unbolted the tripod from the ground, hoisted the gun, a weapon weighing, with its full water jacket, over 90 pounds, and moved it approximately 15 feet forward and to the right. He had bolted it back down. He had continued to fire. He had done this 3 more times. At the 4th position, the position where they found him, he had run out of ammunition, or he had been overrun, or both in some order we cannot reconstruct. His body, when they turned him over, told the rest of the story. There were 76 bullet wounds in him. Most were in the front of his torso and legs. 2 were in his face. There were 24 bayonet wounds. 9 of them were in his back. This detail is important. It means that at the very end, when he was already dead or dying, Japanese soldiers running past him had continued to bayonet him. That was not standard practice. Bayonet wounds on a fallen enemy meant one of 2 things: pure rage, or the ritualized taking of a life by soldiers who understood in some way that the man they had just killed had done something worth remembering. Beside the body, McCarthy's detail found the M1 carbine from the tent, empty, its bolt still forward. The steel Red Cross armband, its white circle scorched and blackened, still tied to Salomon's left bicep. His round-rimmed dental school glasses, cracked at the right lens, hooked over one ear. A single unused syrette of morphine in his left breast pocket. Its wrapper was still sealed. That last detail was the one McCarthy would later tell the historian Edmund G. Love that broke him, because it meant that in the middle of all of it, after his first kill, and his second, and his third, and after moving the gun for the first time, and the second time and the third time, and after taking his first bullet and his 10th and his 40th, Ben Salomon had not, at any point, thought to give himself the morphine that would have made the last 10 minutes easier. He had saved it. He had saved it, McCarthy said, because he was a doctor, and morphine was for the wounded. And until he was safely dead, he was not, in his own understanding, wounded enough to be a patient. The math of what he did is worth pausing on. 98 dead in a semicircle, from 4 gun positions, in approximately 22 minutes. Roughly 1 enemy killed every 13 seconds. To kill a running human being with a .30 caliber M1917 requires you to hold the gun down against its natural upward creep, lead your target by a length that depends on his distance from you, correct for the vibration of the tripod, and account for the smoke of your own barrel obscuring the sight. Picture within the first 50 rounds. Trained machine gunners of the Pacific War, men who had been doing this for months, considered a hit rate of 1 in 20 to be excellent. Salomon's hit rate cannot be calculated exactly, because we do not know how many rounds he fired. When the counterattack reached the clearing 3 days later, and the Marines and Army infantry came up through the ironwoods and found him, the very first man in, a Sergeant Robles of Company G, a big farm kid from the Hudson Valley, stopped at the edge of the semicircle of enemy dead, and did not enter it. He stood at its edge for a very long moment. Then, without being told to, he took off his helmet. Every man behind him, seeing the sergeant do it, did the same. 98 enemy dead, 76 bullet wounds, 24 bayonet wounds, 4 gun positions, 1 dentist, an unused syrette of morphine, still sealed in a khaki pocket over a stopped heart. That was what the burial detail found on the morning of July 10, 1944, above the coastal plain of Tanapag on the island of Saipan. 2 weeks after the counterattack, Major McCarthy of the 27th Infantry Division sat down in a tent on Saipan and wrote up the first Medal of Honor recommendation for Captain Benjamin L. Salomon. He wrote it in longhand on regimental letterhead over the course of 2 nights. He attached the burial details report. He attached sworn statements from Ballard, from Silverberg, and from 4 other members of the aid station staff who had made it out that morning. He attached his own map of the 4 gun positions and the semicircle of enemy dead. He forwarded the recommendation up the divisional chain. It came back 3 weeks later, denied. The reason, typed on a small memorandum from the Adjutant General's office, was this. Under Article 24 of the Geneva Convention of 1929, a medical officer serving in an official medical capacity, wearing the Red Cross brassard, is a non-combatant. The Medal of Honor is a decoration for combat valor. The recommendation is therefore ineligible for consideration. McCarthy read the memorandum twice. Then he sat down and wrote a second recommendation. He rewrote the language. He emphasized that Salomon had defended a medical facility. He emphasized that under Article 24 itself, a medical officer had the right to defend his patients when they were attacked and unable to defend themselves. He submitted it. It came back denied. McCarthy submitted a third recommendation in 1945. Denied. McCarthy left the Army in 1946. He went home to New York. He became a lawyer. He kept a copy of the burial details report with his handwritten notes in a fireproof safe in his basement for the next 43 years. The fourth recommendation was submitted in 1951 by the Army Medical Department at the request of the American Dental Association. It was denied. The fifth was submitted in 1969 by a group of veterans of the 27th Infantry Division. It was denied. Each case, the language of the denial was slightly different, but the substance was the same. A dentist wearing a Red Cross armband could not, under the interpretive framework the Army had chosen to lock itself into in 1944, be given the country's highest military honor. The paperwork accumulated in a filing cabinet in the Pentagon. Meanwhile, Salomon's mother, who had received the Purple Heart on behalf of her son in a small ceremony at a National Guard armory in Milwaukee in 1945, grew old. Salomon's father died in 1958. His mother died in 1972. She was buried beside her husband in a Jewish cemetery on Milwaukee's north side. On her headstone, at her own request, is engraved only her name and her dates, and beneath them the single word in Hebrew, Ema, mother. Not beloved mother or our mother, just mother. As though, at the end, being Ben Salomon's mother was the only identifier she had wanted. The story might have ended there, quietly in a filing cabinet, alongside a headstone in Wisconsin. It did not. In 1998, a dental professor at USC named Dr. Robert West, who had grown up hearing rumors of a former USC dental student who had done something impossible on Saipan, went looking for the file. He was by then in his 60s. He was by profession an oral surgeon, not a historian, but he was by upbringing a Presbyterian minister's son from Missouri, and he had a stubbornness that surprised people. He obtained the burial details report. He obtained the sworn statements. He obtained the 5 denied Medal of Honor recommendations. He obtained the after-action report of the 27th Infantry Division. He obtained a copy of the interpretive memorandum that had blocked the first recommendation in 1944. He read all of it. Then he sat down and wrote, from a dentist to the Department of the Army, a 50-page brief arguing that the interpretive memorandum was wrong. His argument was straightforward. Article 24 of the Geneva Convention, he wrote, prohibits medical personnel from initiating combat, does not prohibit them from defending their patients when their patients are under direct attack and cannot defend themselves. Salomon, in the morning of July 7, 1944, had done nothing but the latter. Every single one of his kills, every one of the 98, had been made after the aid station tent was attacked. Every single one had been in defense of wounded men in his direct care. Under the convention itself, West argued, Salomon had not violated his non-combatant status. He had upheld it. The brief was well written, it was quiet, it did not argue emotion, it argued law. The Army sent it to the Judge Advocate General's Corps. The JAG Corps sent it to a review board. The review board recommended that the earlier denials be reversed. In late 2001, President George W. Bush was briefed on the case in the Oval Office. He was briefed with a small stack of photographs. One of them was the graduation photograph of a young man from Milwaukee in a dark suit holding a diploma from the USC School of Dentistry dated 1937. Bush, according to a staffer who was in the room, looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he said quietly, 58 years. Then he signed the approval. On May 1, 2002, in the East Room of the White House, President Bush presented the Medal of Honor of the United States posthumously to Captain Benjamin Louis Salomon. Dr. Robert West accepted the medal on behalf of the USC School of Dentistry. Ballard the corpsman, now 80 years old, retired, living in a small house in Buffalo, was in the audience. Silverberg was there. So were 3 surviving members of the 105th Infantry Regiment. So was Major McCarthy's daughter, who had brought her father's original 1944 handwritten recommendation, still smelling faintly of cordite and salt. Bush read the citation aloud. It took approximately 6 minutes. At the end, in the last paragraph, the citation says this: Captain Salomon's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. The medal is now housed at the Army Medical Department Museum at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. A replica hangs at the Herman Ostrow School of Dentistry at USC in a small glass case in the main Memorial Hall. On the second floor of the Memorial Hall above the case is the graduation photograph. The young man in the dark suit is not smiling. He is not looking at the camera. He is looking, in the framing of that 1937 pose, slightly upward and to the left, into the future, as though seeing something the photographer could not see. Every first-year dental student at USC, before their first patient of their first clinical rotation, is walked past that case. They are told, this is who came before you. They are told he did not have to be a soldier. He was a dentist. He was one of us. And on July 7, 1944, on an island in the Pacific, he did what no dentist has ever done again, because he understood more clearly than the U.S. Army did for 58 years, that a man who has sworn to heal is not disqualified from defending the healed. They are told this, and then they are sent to their first patient of their first rotation, most often a child from an underserved neighborhood in East Los Angeles, in a chair not far from the boarding house on Boyle Heights where a 19-year-old immigrant from Milwaukee once ate delicatessen sandwiches and dreamed of 2 dental chairs and a waiting room full of life and time and the Saturday Evening Post. The waiting room he never built, the city he never came home to, the office he drew twice in the margins of a battalion supply log in the last week of his life. He had planned to buy it when the war was over. The war was over. He did not come home, but the medal did, 58 years late, presented in the end, not by a general, but by another dentist, placed in a small glass case above a photograph of a boy who never smiled quite right, in a school on a hill above the city he loved. And every year on July 7th at 05:20 in the morning, the approximate moment when the first Japanese soldier crawled through the back canvas of an aid station tent above the Tanapag coastal plain, an American flag at the Herman Ostrow School of Dentistry is quietly lowered to half staff. Very few students notice. The ones who do know why.